Have you ever found yourself in a moment of extreme stress, a car accident, a fall, or a sudden threat, where time seemed to stretch, every second pulling long and heavy, every detail becoming strangely sharp? You are not alone. Across countless stories, people who have faced danger often recount the same eerie phenomenon. Time appears to slow down, as if reality itself steps into a different rhythm. This experience, called time dilation, isn't just a poetic metaphor, it is a real and measurable distortion of how the human brain perceives the flow of time, and the deeper you go, the more you realize how thin and fragile our sense of now truly is. Imagine your brain as a relentless clock, ticking away, constructing your experience, moment by moment. Under normal circumstances, it keeps pace smoothly, but when adrenaline floods your system, when survival instincts seize control, the machinery shifts. It's as if a hidden hand grasps the clock's hands and drags them slower, offering you more moments to react, to fight, or to flee. In that suspended world, where danger presses close and decisions mean life or death, our perception of time twists in ways that seem almost supernatural. Scientists have long been fascinated by this phenomenon. In one famous experiment, researchers asked volunteers to fall backward into a net from a tall platform, a moment of intense fear for most people. They then tested whether the participants could perceive images shown faster than normal, assuming their brains were truly speeding up, like a high-speed camera. The results were surprising. While people reported that time had felt stretched, their actual perception did not improve. The brain didn't work faster, but memory was enhanced. In stressful moments, the mind records more details, more snapshots per second, creating a denser memory trace. When you later look back on those moments, the flood of vivid detail tricks your mind into believing the event lasted longer than it actually did. But not all scientists are convinced this is the whole story. Some believe there may indeed be a subtle real-time alteration in perception, a fleeting expansion of the present. After all, the brain is a prediction machine, constantly forecasting what will happen next. In high-stress moments, it could adjust its expectations, slow its internal tempo, and heighten its attention to micro-changes in the environment. When milliseconds can mean the difference between survival and disaster, such an ability would offer a decisive evolutionary advantage. Time dilation isn't limited to near-death experiences or catastrophic events. Athletes often report a similar phenomenon during peak moments of performance. A quarterback dodging tackles, a martial artist anticipating a punch, a skier navigating a treacherous slope, all describe the sensation of the world moving in slow motion, their own actions feeling both instinctive and deliberate. In these moments, the brain's ability to predict, react, and remember becomes hyper-tuned, opening a doorway into a reality where seconds seem elastic. But why does our brain allow such distortions? The answer may lie deep within our neurobiology. The amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, lights up during fear and stress, triggering the fight or flight response. Simultaneously, the locus coeruleus, a small structure in the brainstem, floods the brain with norepinephrine, sharpening focus and enhancing memory formation. Together, these systems create a state of hyper-awareness. Evolution sculpted these reactions over millions of years, fine-tuning them to help our ancestors survive predators, ambushes, and disasters. What feels like a supernatural warping of time is in truth an ancient biological survival mechanism. Yet there is a paradox hidden in the heart of time dilation. In the moment itself, you might not consciously experience the slow motion effect. It often becomes apparent only in hindsight, when the mind replays the event, layer after layer of sensory detail unfurling, It's a trick of memory, of perception, of attention, but no less real, for being so elusive. Interestingly, time dilation also appears in the accounts of those who have experienced intense joy, awe, or profound emotional revelation. Moments of falling in love, watching a child take their first steps, standing atop a mountain after a long climb. These too can feel stretched, expanded beyond ordinary measures. In these cases, however, the dilation is softer, more luminous, tinged with wonder rather than fear. It suggests that emotional intensity, whether positive or negative, can bend our perception of time, pulling it into shapes that the ticking of a mechanical clock can never fully capture. Some theories even suggest that time dilation could be the key to unlocking altered states of consciousness. Mystics, monks, and shamans across cultures have long described experiences where time seems to stop, spiral, or dissolve entirely. Whether achieved through meditation, rituals, or intense focus, these states mirror the same cognitive shifts seen during moments of acute stress. Perhaps the brain, when pushed to its limits, unlocks a hidden flexibility in its treatment of time, a reminder that our experience of reality is not fixed, but fluid, shaped by biology, emotion, and mind. There are darker sides to time dilation too. In post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), survivors of horrific events often find themselves trapped in an eternal replay, the traumatic moment stretching endlessly in their minds. Time stops not as a gift, but as a curse. Understanding how the brain warps time under stress could one day help doctors and therapists find better treatments, allowing victims to reclaim their sense of temporal flow and escape the haunted corridors of memory. In the realm of physics, the term time dilation takes on an even grander meaning. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time itself can slow down relative to an observer traveling at immense speeds, or near a massive gravitational field. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station, moving at 28,000 kilometers per hour, age a tiny fraction of a second slower than those of us on Earth. Time dilation is not just a trick of the mind, it is woven into the very fabric of the universe. And perhaps that's the ultimate mystery. Time, which we experience as an unbreakable river flowing from past to future, is neither absolute nor constant. Whether bent by emotion, memory, gravity, or speed, it reveals itself to be something far stranger, a dimension as malleable as space itself. Each heartbeat, each breath, each blink of an eye is stitched together by the brain into the illusion of steady passage. Yet under the right conditions, the curtain lifts, and we glimpse the deeper truth. Time can stretch, warp, and even fracture. The next time you find yourself in a moment so intense that time itself seems to bend, remember, you are touching something ancient, something elemental. You are stepping outside the ordinary flow, entering a world where seconds become landscapes and memories carve deeper grooves. You are, for a heartbeat, a traveler in a universe where time is not a master but a mystery, and you are free to move through it in ways most people never realize are possible. So pay attention the next time life suddenly slows. It's not just your imagination, it's a doorway into a deeper reality, a whisper from the hidden architecture of your mind, telling you that the ordinary is only one version of time, and many others lie just beneath the surface waiting to be discovered.
Have you ever learned a new word, perhaps something obscure or specialized, and then, as if the universe itself were conspiring, you begin to see it everywhere, in conversations, in books, on television, in passing street signs? Suddenly, this once hidden concept seems to flood your entire reality. It feels uncanny, almost supernatural, as if learning the word had unlocked a hidden layer of the world that was always there, waiting, just outside your field of view. This bewildering experience has a name, the BMH, or phenomenon, also widely known as the frequency illusion. But make no mistake, Though it feels like a trick played by the universe, it is in fact a profound glimpse into how the human mind edits, filters, and manufactures reality itself. The name BMH offers a playful nod to the researchers and thinkers who popularized the study of this phenomenon, blending the initials of their names into a mysterious-sounding term that perfectly fits the oddness of the experience. Yet, beneath this name lies something very real, a glimpse into the powerful cognitive biases that shape every waking moment of our lives without our even realizing it. It starts simply. You encounter a new concept. Perhaps you hear about cryptobiosis, the survival of certain organisms in a state of extreme dormancy, or you stumble upon the word sonder, the realization that each passerby lives a life as vivid and complex as your own. Initially, the term is novel, perhaps even challenging to grasp, but then the floodgates open. Suddenly, cryptobiosis pops up in a science article you randomly click. Sonder is mentioned in a novel you pick up by chance. Friends casually drop the words into conversations without ever having said them before. Billboards, social media posts, podcasts, everywhere you look, there it is, as if reality itself has been quietly rewritten to center this new knowledge. In truth, the world hasn't changed. You have. The frequency illusion reveals the delicate, largely invisible architecture of attention, where your brain acts not as an objective recorder of reality, but as an editor, a sculptor of the raw chaos of sensory information, shaping it into something coherent, manageable, and meaningful. And when something new is added to the editor's palette, it gets highlighted, magnified, stitched into the tapestry of your awareness in ways that were previously impossible. The mechanisms behind the frequency illusion are complex, yet beautifully logical. They hinge on two primary cognitive processes: selective attention and confirmation bias. Selective attention is your mind's way of filtering the overwhelming flood of sensory data, bombarding you every second. You don't see every face, read every sign, or hear every snippet of conversation. You focus, often unconsciously, on what seems important, what aligns with your goals, emotions, and recent experiences. Confirmation bias, on the other hand, is the mind's tendency to notice, remember, and give weight to information that confirms what it already believes or expects. When these two forces combine, a newly learned word or concept seems to explode into ubiquity, not because the world has shifted, but because your perception has. This revelation might be humbling or terrifying. If our brains can so easily twist the apparent fabric of reality based on tiny changes in knowledge or focus, how much of what we experience day to day is truly objective? How many illusions of frequency, importance, danger, or opportunity are shaping our decisions, our beliefs, even our identities? Interestingly, the BMH phenomenon doesn't only apply to words or academic concepts. It extends into nearly every aspect of life. Have you ever decided to buy a particular model of car, only to suddenly notice that exact model everywhere you go? Or perhaps you learned about a rare disease, and then in a matter of days, hear about multiple people being diagnosed with it. The principle remains the same. Your mind, now sensitized to a new pattern, highlights every occurrence of it, assembling an artificial surge in frequency that feels utterly convincing. This experience can have profound effects on behavior. In marketing, companies exploit the frequency illusion by planting product names or concepts into public consciousness, just enough that consumers start perceiving them as omnipresent trends. Politicians use it to create a sense of urgency around certain issues, bombarding media cycles, to ensure that topics stick in the public's selective attention and trigger confirmation bias loops. Even in personal relationships, misunderstandings can bloom from frequency illusion. Once you suspect a friend is upset with you, every ambiguous gesture, every slight pause in conversation, every neutral text can feel like overwhelming evidence confirming your fear. At a deeper level, the BMH phenomenon touches on the profound fragility of human memory and perception. The brain is not a passive observer of the world, it is an active creator, constantly building and rebuilding a model of reality that is workable, but not necessarily accurate. In moments of frequency illusion, we glimpse just how slippery and constructed that model truly is. Moreover, the effect isn't limited to individuals, it can spread across groups, becoming a kind of collective hallucination. Sociologists and psychologists, studying moral panics, waves of widespread fear often based on exaggerated threats, have found that frequency illusion plays a powerful role. As media coverage of a topic increases, people begin noticing related incidents more often, even when actual rates have not changed. This fuels a self-reinforcing cycle, where perception and fear drive further attention, which drives greater perception, spiraling into full-blown societal anxieties. Consider how news of airline crashes, rare but dramatic, can lead to sudden spikes in fear of flying, even though statistically, air travel remains the safest form of transportation. Or how reports of certain crimes, once sensationalized, can lead communities to believe they are under siege, even if crime rates are stable or declining. The BMH phenomenon, it turns out, isn't just an odd trick of the mind. It is a force that can shape the destinies of individuals, businesses, and entire nations. And yet, understanding this illusion does not make one immune to it. Even as you read this, you might find yourself becoming more aware of frequency illusion in your daily life, noticing it in ways you hadn't before. Paradoxically, that very awareness may amplify the phenomenon. The mind, curious and vigilant, loves patterns and meanings. The more you think about it, the more you may encounter examples, and the deeper the illusion burrows into your perception. There is a certain magic in this too, to realize that our minds are not rigid recorders, but dynamic artists, painting reality with the brushstrokes of attention and memory, is to glimpse the creative core of consciousness itself. Each moment we live is not a fixed, unchanging thing, but a flexible, evolving interpretation, a dance between what is and what we are prepared to see. The frequency illusion reminds us to tread lightly on the ground of certainty. What seems overwhelmingly common, important, or dangerous may be no more than the mind's own spotlight at work. Reality is far bigger, messier, and stranger than our filters allow us to perceive. Every thought, every new piece of knowledge, reshapes the landscape of awareness, guiding what we notice, what we remember, what we believe. Next time you learn a new word, or discover a new idea, and feel it swirling around you like a sudden storm, pause, smile. You are not witnessing a glitch in the universe. You are glimpsing the marvelous, mysterious workings of your own mind. You are watching your consciousness, ever dynamic, weave itself into the fabric of existence, pulling threads of meaning from the chaos, building the patterns that shape your story. And if it sometimes feels like the universe is whispering back to you, echoing the new language you've learned, do not be afraid. Perhaps in a way it is, not because the outside world has shifted, but because you, the dreamer, the builder of inner worlds, have tuned your senses to hear it. In the end, the BMH phenomenon is not a trick, it is a reminder that we live not in a static universe of facts, but in a flowing river of perception, where attention sculpts reality, moment by moment. It invites us to wonder if a single word can flood our world with new meaning. What else might we be missing?
just beyond the edges of awareness, waiting for a single spark of recognition to come to life.
Imagine for a moment that you can clearly remember an event, the vivid details, the emotions, the sounds, even the exact way the sunlight slanted through the window that day. It feels so real, so undeniable, that you would swear on your life it happened. But what if it didn't? What if that memory, so intimately woven into the fabric of your personal history, was nothing more than an elaborate illusion crafted by your own mind? Welcome to the unsettling world of false memories, a phenomenon that strikes at the very heart of what it means to know oneself, blurring the line between reality and imagination in ways most of us never suspect. The mind, for all its brilliance, is not a perfect recorder of experience. It is a creative, adaptive organ, designed more for survival and meaning-making than for mechanical accuracy. Every memory you hold dear is not a preserved film reel, stored untouched in some mental archive. It is a living reconstruction, a story retold and slightly rewritten each time you recall it. The act of remembering is, paradoxically, an act of editing, and with every retelling, the potential for distortion grows. In this way, false memories can arise not through deliberate lies or fantasy, but through the natural, unavoidable processes of perception, emotion, and time. False memories can be surprisingly mundane. You might misremember where you left your keys, or swear you sent an important email that upon inspection was never written, but they can also be profound, even life-altering. Entire chapters of a person's life can be fabricated, filled with events that feel utterly authentic yet never occurred. In legal contexts, false memories have led to wrongful convictions, families torn apart, and decades-long battles over what truly happened in the hazy corridors of the past. One of the most famous studies on false memories was conducted by cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, who demonstrated just how malleable human memory can be. In her experiments, participants were shown a series of photographs depicting a minor car accident, and then asked leading questions about what they had seen. Those who were subtly prompted with the word smashed, rather than hit, later recalled seeing broken glass at the scene, even though no such glass existed. A single word carefully chosen was enough to implant a false detail into a previously clear memory. Loftus went further, showing that entire false events could be seeded into people's minds. In one study, participants were asked to recall a fabricated event, being lost in a shopping mall as a child. Over time, with gentle suggestion, many participants developed detailed, emotionally charged memories of the event, complete with imagined rescues, specific stores, and vivid sensations. They genuinely believed these memories were their own. But how is this possible? At the core of the false memory phenomenon is the realization that memory is not a passive recording device, but an active, constructive process. The brain stores fragments of experiences, sights, sounds, emotions, facts, not as complete packages, but as scattered puzzle pieces. When we recall a memory, our mind rapidly reconstructs it from these fragments, filling in gaps with plausible details drawn from imagination, expectation, and outside information. In most cases, the process works beautifully, but sometimes, especially under the right conditions, the reconstruction goes wrong. Stress, suggestion, emotion, and repeated storytelling can all heighten the likelihood of false memories forming. In moments of trauma or confusion, the mind may scramble to make sense of incomplete or overwhelming information, weaving a coherent narrative that feels true but is built on unstable foundations. Similarly, repeated questioning, hypnosis, or therapy sessions that encourage vivid imagination can unintentionally nurture false memories,
leading individuals to feel more certain about events that never occurred. This becomes especially troubling when considering the reliability of eyewitness testimony, once regarded as the gold standard in courts of law. Research has shown that eyewitnesses are highly susceptible to suggestion, stress, and group dynamics. In the infamous Central Park 5 case, teenagers confessed to a crime they did not commit, their memories twisted under the immense pressure of aggressive interrogation techniques. Years later, DNA evidence exonerated them, but the damage to their lives, built on the scaffolding of false memories, was already done. False memories are not confined to dramatic legal cases. They infiltrate the quiet corners of everyday life. Families often argue over conflicting recollections of shared events. Who said what? Who started the fight? Who forgot the birthday? Each person's version feels irrefutably real, yet they cannot all be correct. In truth, every memory is shaped by perspective, emotion, and later experiences, like a painting slowly altered by invisible hands each time it is viewed. Curiously, even collective false memories exist, shared by large groups of people across society. This phenomenon, dubbed the Mandela effect, refers to widespread misrememberings of historical facts or cultural details. Many people, for example, distinctly recall Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, even though he lived until 2013. Others remember the Monopoly man wearing a monocle, he doesn't, or the name of the popular children's book series as the Berenstain Bears instead of the correct Berenstain Bears. These shared false memories hint at deeper quirks in how information spreads and stabilizes within social groups, suggesting that memory is not just personal, but profoundly collective. Neuroscientists probing the brain have begun to unravel the mechanisms behind false memories. Functional MRI studies reveal that recalling a false memory activates many of the same brain regions as recalling a true one, including the hippocampus, the region essential for memory formation. To the brain, a well-constructed false memory feels just as authentic as the real thing. This neurological overlap explains why it can be almost impossible to distinguish between the two based on intuition alone. Some researchers have even managed to induce false memories, deliberately using sophisticated techniques. In animal studies, scientists have implanted fear memories into mice by activating specific neurons in the hippocampus, causing the mice to behave as if they had experienced an electric shock in a particular location, even when no shock had ever occurred. Though the ethical implications of such work are enormous, it opens chilling possibilities. If memories can be implanted, erased, or altered, what does that mean for personal identity, for truth, for justice? In the realm of therapy, false memories pose a double-edged sword. On one hand, recovering repressed memories of real trauma can be deeply healing. On the other, suggestive techniques can unintentionally create false memories of events that never happened, leading to new trauma and fractured relationships. The delicate balance between validating a person's experience and avoiding the implantation of false narratives requires immense care, humility, and scientific rigor. The implications of false memories stretch even further. Philosophers have long pondered the nature of reality, questioning whether our perceptions are trustworthy guides to truth. If our most intimate memories, the building blocks of our personal histories, can be false, then on what foundation does the self rest? Are we not, at least in part, fictional characters of our own invention, living stories shaped by fact, fabrication, and forgotten dreams? This unsettling realization need not lead to despair. Rather, it can inspire awe at the creativity of the human mind. Memory is not a mechanical recording, but a living, breathing story, constantly revised to fit new understandings, new needs, and new hopes. We are storytellers by nature, and the stories we tell ourselves about our pasts, even when imperfect, are the scaffolding upon which we build meaning, identity, and purpose. Understanding the fragility of memory also cultivates compassion for ourselves and for others. When we argue over conflicting memories with a loved one, it is not necessarily because one of us is lying. More often, both are telling the truth as they perceive it, shaped by the invisible forces of emotion, bias, and the passage of time. Recognizing this can soften anger, heal wounds, and foster a deeper sense of connection across the gaps of experience. In the end, memory is a miracle, albeit an imperfect one. It allows us to learn, to love, to carry forward the lessons of the past. It binds us together across generations and across cultures, but it also reminds us that truth is rarely pure and never simple. Each recollection is a tapestry woven from threads of fact and imagination, emotion and narrative, stitched together not to perfectly mirror reality, but to create a reality we can live with. The next time you close your eyes and drift back into memory, feeling the sun on your face, hearing the laughter of a lost afternoon, remember, you are not simply reliving the past, you are in that moment, creating it anew. And somewhere, hidden in the folds of your mind, a small, beautiful mystery remains, the wonder that even false memories, for all their inaccuracy, are real in the only way that truly matters to you.
There are moments in life, fleeting yet profound, when time seems to falter, when the air itself seems charged with an invisible electricity, and you are seized by a sudden, inexplicable sensation. I have been here before. You glance around, the faces, the room, the words being spoken, and every detail feels hauntingly familiar. Yet you know, rationally, that this is impossible. You have never been in this exact place, at this exact time. Still, the feeling persists, deep and unsettling, a whisper from some hidden corner of existence. This is déjà vu, one of the most mysterious phenomena of human experience, where the boundary between memory and perception blurs, and the mind momentarily loses its grip on reality. The term déjà vu comes from the French, meaning already seen, and it captures perfectly the eerie sensation of familiarity without recollection. Psychologists estimate that over 2/3 of people will experience déjà vu at least once in their lifetime, often beginning in adolescence or early adulthood. For some, it is a rare curiosity, a momentary shiver. For others, it occurs frequently, coloring their experience of life with a strange, almost mystical hue. Yet, despite its commonness, déjà vu remains one of the least understood phenomena in cognitive science, a riddle that teases the edges of neuroscience, psychology, and even philosophy. For centuries, déjà vu was treated with superstition. Ancient cultures often regarded it as a glimpse into past lives, or a sign of prophetic abilities. In the Middle Ages, it was sometimes seen as evidence of demonic interference or divine revelation. Writers and poets wove it into their works as proof that time was not linear, but circular, that our lives were echoes of something already lived. Even today, in an age of MRI machines and neural mapping, some still wonder, is déjà vu evidence of reincarnation, a crack in the fabric of time, a glimpse into parallel universes? Science offers more grounded, but no less fascinating, explanations. One prominent theory suggests that déjà vu arises from a glitch in the brain's memory system, specifically, a brief misfiring between the circuits responsible for short-term and long-term memory. Under normal conditions, incoming sensory information is processed first in the short-term memory centers, and if significant, encoded into long-term memory. But sometimes, the brain mistakenly routes new experiences directly to the long-term memory circuits, bypassing the short-term filters.
The result is that the new experience feels like a recollection because the brain is treating it as one, even though it is happening for the first time. Neuroscientists studying the hippocampus, the brain region crucial for memory formation, have found that it can sometimes produce recognition signals even without a specific memory attached. These false positives might underlie the feeling of familiarity that defines déjà vu. In essence, the brain is telling you, you've seen this before, even when it objectively hasn't. Another theory points to perceptual processing errors. Our brains are adept at processing visual, auditory, and spatial information in parallel, seamlessly integrating them into a coherent experience. But if there is a slight delay in processing, say, if the brain processes the same scene twice out of sync, it could create the illusion of repetition. Imagine watching a movie where one frame is accidentally duplicated. The effect would be jarring, giving you the sense that you had already seen a moment that is in fact unfolding for the first time. Intriguingly, déjà vu appears to be more common in people who are highly educated, those who travel frequently, and those who are prone to imagination and fantasy. Stress, fatigue, and moments of emotional intensity also seem to increase the likelihood of experiencing it. It suggests that déjà vu may be linked not to a defect, but to the richness and complexity of the brain's information processing abilities. Epilepsy provides a particularly compelling window into the mechanics of déjà vu. Patients with temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition where abnormal electrical activity occurs in the temporal lobes of the brain, often report intense déjà vu episodes just before seizures. Neurologists have even been able to induce déjà vu artificially by electrically stimulating the temporal lobes during surgery. These findings hint that déjà vu may be related to tiny, harmless micro-seizures in healthy individuals, brief surges of neural activity that distort the perception of new events. Yet, scientific explanations, while illuminating, do not fully capture the emotional resonance of déjà vu. There is something profoundly unsettling and profoundly beautiful about the experience. It suggests that time is not the rigid arrow we believe it to be, but something more fluid, more mysterious. In moments of déjà vu, we glimpse the possibility that the future and the past are not neatly separated, that memory and perception are twin reflections in a single mirror. Some speculative theories push even further into the unknown. The idea of parallel universes, that there exist infinite alternate realities, where every possible version of your life is playing out, has captivated physicists and philosophers alike. In this view, déjà vu could represent a fleeting overlap between two realities, a moment when you and your parallel self are aligned perfectly, experiencing the same event across dimensions. There is no empirical evidence for this hypothesis, but its poetic beauty continues to inspire. Another perspective considers déjà vu as a form of precognitive experience, a glimpse of a moment just milliseconds before it fully registers in consciousness. Perhaps the brain, operating slightly out of sync with itself, experiences the memory of an event just before the event becomes fully conscious. In this view, déjà vu is less about memory and more about the nature of consciousness itself, a hint that our experience of now is constructed moment by moment, and that construction sometimes stutters, revealing the scaffolding behind the illusion. The phenomenon also touches upon deeper philosophical questions. What is the nature of memory? Is reality fixed, or is it constantly recreated by the mind? If two moments feel identical, what makes one the present and the other the memory? Are our lives a progression of unique events, or a tapestry of patterns endlessly repeating, endlessly fracturing into variations we barely perceive? Some researchers have suggested that déjà vu serves an evolutionary purpose. The feeling of familiarity might function as a kind of error-checking mechanism, prompting the brain to slow down and pay closer attention to the environment. In uncertain or dangerous situations, recognizing subtle patterns could offer a survival advantage. If you feel you have been in a situation before, even falsely, you might act more cautiously, increasing your chances of avoiding threats. Interestingly, not all experiences of repetition are unsettling. There is also a phenomenon called déjà vu, already lived, which is more intense and immersive than typical déjà vu. Individuals experiencing déjà vu not only feel that they have seen the scene before, but that they are reliving it, often accompanied by overwhelming emotions of nostalgia, wonder, or dread. In extreme cases, such as in certain neurological conditions, patients may become trapped in continuous loops of déjà vu, unable to distinguish new experiences from old memories. On the flip side, there are opposite phenomena, like jamais vu, déjà vu, where familiar experiences feel oddly unfamiliar, as if encountering the everyday for the first time. Together, these experiences reveal just how delicate and fallible our perceptions of familiarity, time, and reality truly are. In literature and art, déjà vu has been a fertile ground for exploration. Writers like Marcel Proust wove it into grand narratives about memory and time. Filmmakers use it as a device to unsettle audiences, to hint that characters are trapped in repeating timelines or manipulated realities. The Matrix famously captured the feeling with the black cat scene, a glitch that revealed the underlying unreality of the world. Ultimately, déjà vu remains a mystery, not because we lack explanations, but because it touches something primal in us, the fear that reality is less stable than we wish to believe, the wonder that perhaps, just perhaps, there is more to existence than the immediate present. The next time you experience that uncanny, weightless feeling, the sense that you have stepped outside time and memory, that the moment unfolding before you is both new and ancient, pause, listen, feel the strange music of the moment. You are glimpsing the hidden architecture of consciousness, the shimmering edge where memory and perception, past and future, weave together into the tapestry of now. You are for a heartbeat outside the river of time, and in that brief, impossible instant, you are infinite.
There are few experiences more disorienting and oddly mesmerizing than gazing at a vivid, intricate colored pattern for long minutes and then looking away, only to see the world ripple, dance, and shimmer with ghostly after-images. The colors linger like echoes burned onto the canvas of reality, twisting and shifting over ordinary surfaces, distorting vision in ways both fascinating and unsettling. This is the macular effect, a strange and powerful phenomenon where prolonged focus on intense color patterns leads to persistent visual hallucinations that can last seconds, minutes, or even longer. It is a phenomenon that reveals how fragile and malleable our visual reality truly is, how much of what we call seeing is an elaborate construction of the brain, a construction that can, under the right conditions, crumble and reassemble in ways that feel both alien and eerily beautiful. The macular effect is named after the macula, a small but critical region of the retina responsible for central, high-resolution color vision. It is this tiny patch, just a few millimeters across, that allows us to read, recognize faces, and perceive fine details. Packed densely with cone photoreceptors, specialized cells that detect color, the macula acts as the brain's primary window onto the colorful world. But like any delicate instrument, it has its vulnerabilities. When the macula is bombarded with intense high-contrast stimuli, especially repetitive or swirling patterns of color, it can become temporarily overloaded, triggering a cascade of neural responses that manifest as lingering visual distortions. At the heart of the macular effect lies a simple but profound truth. The brain does not passively receive visual information. Instead, it constantly interprets, predicts, and adjusts, filling in gaps, smoothing over noise, and stitching together a coherent picture from the fragmentary signals it receives from the eyes. When you stare at a vibrant pattern, especially one designed with optical illusions in mind, the photoreceptors in your retina become adapted to the specific wavelengths of light they are absorbing. Some cones become fatigued, their sensitivity decreasing, while others remain fresh and responsive. This imbalance skews the signals sent to the brain, creating the conditions for vivid afterimages once your gaze shifts away. These afterimages are not merely passive shadows of the original image. They can twist and evolve, sometimes taking on colors that were never present in the original pattern, a phenomenon known as complementary afterimages. If you stare at a red shape, you may see green afterward. If you fixate on yellow, a ghostly blue may appear. This color inversion is not random, but follows predictable rules based on the way different cone types in the eye respond to stimulation and fatigue. But the macular effect goes beyond simple color afterimages. When exposure to complex high-frequency patterns is prolonged, the brain's visual processing centers, particularly areas like V1 and V4 in the visual cortex, can become temporarily destabilized. Instead of smoothly interpreting incoming signals, they begin to generate spontaneous, self-sustaining patterns of neural activity. The result is a form of benign visual hallucination, swirling shapes, flowing textures, shifting grids that overlay the normal visual field, independent of any external stimulus. Reality seems to melt and reform under the gaze, a living tapestry of color and form, spun not by the world outside, but by the mind within. Such experiences have fascinated artists, scientists, and philosophers for centuries. Ancient shamans would gaze at patterned fabrics or flickering flames to induce visions, harnessing the natural vulnerability of the visual system to explore altered states of consciousness. In the 20th century, artists of the OP art movement, like Bridget Riley and Victor Vasarely, deliberately crafted paintings designed to trigger visual instability, forcing viewers into a heightened, almost hallucinatory awareness of their own perceptual processes. They understood that seeing is not merely receiving but active creation, and that by manipulating the tools of perception, one could reveal the hidden workings of the mind itself. Neurologists have studied the macular effect and related phenomena through brain imaging techniques, seeking to understand the neural circuits involved. Functional MRI scans show that during afterimage experiences, the visual cortex remains active, even in the absence of direct visual input, suggesting that these hallucinations arise from internal feedback loops rather than external stimuli. The brain, deprived of stable signals, falls back on its own intrinsic patterns, like a restless orchestra improvising in the dark. This self-generated visual activity shares characteristics with other altered states, including migraines with aura, hypnagogic hallucinations, the vivid imagery experienced when falling asleep, and even certain forms of psychedelic experience. Though the causes differ, chemical, electrical, or sensory, the underlying principle remains consistent. The brain, untethered from its usual anchors, creates its own visual symphonies. Interestingly, the duration and intensity of the macular effect can vary widely among individuals. Factors such as fatigue, hydration, emotional state, and even genetic differences in retinal structure can influence susceptibility. Some people experience only brief flashes of color, others see persistent patterns that overlay their vision for minutes at a time. In rare cases, individuals with visual processing disorders may experience prolonged or even chronic visual disturbances after exposure to intense patterns, a condition known as palinopsia. Despite its sometimes unsettling nature, the macular effect is generally harmless. It reflects the extraordinary adaptability of the visual system, its ability to recalibrate, reset, and recover after sensory overload. Most afterimages fade within seconds or minutes, and normal perception resumes without lasting damage. Yet for those who have felt reality itself bend under the influence of their own senses,
the experience can leave a lingering sense of wonder, a reminder that the world we see is not fixed and objective, but fluid, subjective, and deeply intertwined with the workings of our own minds. The macular effect also invites broader reflection on the nature of perception itself. If our eyes can be so easily fooled, if our brains can conjure vivid illusions from the residue of sensory overload, what does that say about the reliability of our everyday experience? How much of what we call reality is truly out there, and how much is carefully constructed, moment by moment, by the interpretive machinery of the brain? Philosophers have long wrestled with these questions, from Plato's allegory of the cave, where prisoners mistake shadows on a wall for reality, to Kant's assertion that we can never know the thing in itself, only our mental representation of it. The idea that perception is inherently limited and fallible is a cornerstone of human thought. The macular effect offers a direct visceral encounter with this philosophical truth, not as an abstract idea, but as a lived experience, reality shifting under your gaze, colors blooming where none exist, patterns spinning from the void. Even in the realm of modern technology, understanding the macular effect has practical applications. Designers of virtual reality systems, for example, must be cautious in their use of high-frequency patterns and color contrasts, lest they trigger disorienting afterimages that break immersion or induce discomfort. Similarly, warning labels for certain video games and visual media now advise users about the potential for visual fatigue and hallucinations, recognizing the delicate balance between stimulation and overload. On a more personal level, experiencing the macular effect can foster a deeper appreciation for the richness and fragility of vision. Our ability to see is not a simple mechanical process, but a symphony of neural computations, a dance of light and mind that can be pushed, twisted, and reshaped in ways that reveal its underlying artistry. It reminds us that vision is not merely a window to the world but a canvas upon which the brain paints its best approximation of reality. Next time you find yourself staring too long at a vivid painting, a mesmerizing screen, or a shifting sea of colors, and the world afterwards seems to ripple with phantom hues, embrace the wonder of it. You are not broken or deceived. You are witnessing the hidden flexibility of perception itself, the mind's extraordinary ability to build and rebuild reality from the raw material of sensation. In that moment, you are touching something ancient, something fundamental, the knowledge that seeing is not passive, but creative, not static but alive. You are glimpsing the truth that the world you inhabit is not merely given, but made, moment by moment, pattern by pattern, color by fleeting color, in the luminous depths of your mind.
Imagine waking up one morning, glancing across the kitchen table, and seeing a familiar face, the face of someone you love, someone who has been woven into the very fabric of your life. Their voice, their movements, their smile, everything seems right. And yet, a chilling certainty settles over you. This person is not who they appear to be. They are an imposter, a perfect replica, a stranger behind a mask of familiarity. No matter what they say, no matter how they plead, the conviction gnaws at your mind. They have been replaced. This is the dark, haunting world of Capgras delusion, a rare and devastating disorder where reality itself fractures and trust dissolves into a labyrinth of doubt and fear. The phenomenon is named after Joseph Capgras, the French psychiatrist who first described the condition in 1923. He observed a woman who believed that various people in her life, including her husband, had been replaced by identical doubles. She recognized their appearance, but felt an alien distance, an emotional void where connection should have been. Over time, this bizarre belief hardened into an unshakable delusion, impervious to reason or evidence. Capgras delusion is not simply a case of mistaken identity. It is a profound disruption of the very mechanisms by which we recognize and emotionally connect with others. Recognition, under normal circumstances, is seamless. We see a face, hear a voice, and our brains flood us with feelings of familiarity, comfort or love. But in Capgras delusion, something breaks. The visual or auditory recognition remains intact. The person looks and sounds exactly as they should, but the emotional resonance is gone. The result is a cognitive dissonance, so extreme that the brain attempts to resolve it the only way it can, by inventing a narrative where the familiar person is no longer real. This terrifying disconnection points to the delicate, intricate systems that underlie human relationships. Neuroscientists believe that Capgras delusion arises from a disruption between two key brain regions, the fusiform gyrus, responsible for facial recognition, and the amygdala, the emotional center that assigns feelings to familiar stimuli. If the connection between these areas is damaged due to brain injury, neurodegenerative disease, or psychiatric illness, the brain can recognize a face without feeling the expected emotional glow of familiarity. In the absence of emotional validation, the mind fills the gap with an eerie and sinister story. The person must be an imposter. Research into Capgras patients has revealed fascinating patterns. Functional brain imaging shows that while their visual recognition systems remain active, the pathways linking these perceptions to emotional centers are impaired. Some studies even suggest that similar mechanisms might underlie other conditions, such as depersonalization disorder, where individuals feel estranged from their own bodies or experiences. The psychological toll of Capgras delusion is immense. For those who suffer from it, the world becomes a stage of imposters and hidden threats. Loved ones become suspects. Homes feel unfamiliar. Ordinary routines twist into surreal rituals of suspicion and fear. Some patients believe not just that one person has been replaced, but that entire groups, neighbors, doctors, even public figures, have been substituted by doubles. The delusion can expand until reality itself feels hollow, populated by mannequins in human form. Family members and caregivers, meanwhile, face heartbreak and confusion. Imagine being told by your spouse, your parent, or your child that you are not who you claim to be. Imagine the pain of being rejected, feared, even hated by someone you love, not because of anything you have done, but because their brain no longer trusts the evidence of its own senses. The emotional devastation cuts both ways, leaving scars that linger long after the delusion itself has faded. The origins of Capgras delusion are varied. It can emerge after traumatic brain injuries, particularly those affecting the right hemisphere, which plays a critical role in processing visual and emotional information. It can also arise in the context of schizophrenia, where disturbances in thought and perception make individuals vulnerable to bizarre beliefs. In elderly patients, Capgras delusion sometimes appears alongside dementia, as the gradual decay of neural networks disrupts the delicate dance of recognition and emotion. Treatment is challenging. Antipsychotic medications can sometimes reduce the intensity of the delusion, but there is no guaranteed cure. Cognitive behavioral therapy may help patients question their beliefs and rebuild fractured trust, but progress is often slow and fragile. The nature of the disorder, the deep conviction in the reality of the imposter narrative, makes persuasion difficult. Rational arguments slide off the surface of certainty like water off wax, yet there are glimpses of hope. Some patients recover partially or fully over time, especially if the underlying cause, such as a reversible brain injury or a treatable psychiatric condition, can be addressed. Others learn to live with the delusion, developing strategies to coexist with their imposters, even if they cannot fully accept them as real. Capgras delusion, for all its rarity, opens a window into the deepest questions of identity, trust, and reality. It forces us to confront how fragile our sense of the familiar truly is, how much of what we call reality depends on the seamless integration of perception and emotion. Without the warm glow of emotional recognition, even the faces dearest to us can seem hollow, threatening,
strange. The phenomenon also raises haunting philosophical questions. What makes a person who they are? Is it their appearance, their voice, their memories, or the intangible emotional bond we feel toward them? If that bond can be severed, if recognition can be divorced from emotion, what remains of the self, the other, and the world we share? Literature and film have long explored themes that echo the terror of Capgras delusion. Stories of doppelgangers, shapeshifters, and body snatchers tap into the primal fear that those around us are not who they seem. Movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and psychological thrillers that depict hidden imposters mirror the deep unease that Capgras patients live with daily. These narratives resonate precisely because they touch on something universal, the horror of losing trust in the very fabric of reality. In the broader context of human experience, Capgras delusion serves as a stark reminder of the mind's extraordinary, and sometimes terrifying, power to shape reality. The brain constructs a model of the world, stitching together sensory data, memories, and emotions into a coherent whole. But when that construction falters, when key threads unravel, the resulting distortions can be as real and convincing to the sufferer as any objective truth. For the rest of us, understanding Capgras delusion offers both scientific insight and profound empathy. It teaches us humility in the face of the mind's complexity, and compassion for those whose realities have been fractured by forces beyond their control. It invites us to cherish the fragile miracle of recognition, the warmth of a familiar face, the comfort of a trusted voice, and to remember how easily it can slip away. The next time you lock eyes with someone you love and feel that instant surge of connection, that unspoken understanding that they are real, that they are who you know them to be, take a moment to appreciate the intricate dance of perception and emotion that makes such moments possible. Take a moment to marvel at the miracle of recognition, the quiet, everyday wonder that binds us together in a world of shifting faces and infinite mysteries. And if ever the world should tilt, if ever reality should ripple and fracture, remember, behind the imposters and illusions, behind the broken mirrors of the mind, there remains a deeper truth, that love once known leaves traces that even the most shattered perceptions cannot fully erase.
Imagine standing in a dimly lit room, glancing quickly around. Shadows cloak parts of the space, some objects half hidden behind others, angles obscured, lines broken, yet somehow, without effort, without conscious thought, your mind supplies a full, rich understanding of the scene. You don't see just fragmented surfaces and disjointed shapes. You see chairs, tables, books, faces, and walls, a complete world, stitched together seamlessly from fragments. This phenomenon, so automatic and pervasive that we barely notice it happening, is known as the scene completion illusion, the mind's extraordinary ability to fill in missing visual information, creating a coherent experience out of incomplete and often ambiguous input. At first glance, it seems trivial. Of course we see full objects, even if part of them is hidden. Of course we understand scenes even when pieces are missing. But this ordinary magic masks a profound and unsettling truth. Much of what we think we perceive is not actually present in the sensory input. Instead, it is invented by the brain, a best-guess model of reality, assembled with breathtaking speed and unconscious mastery. The brain's capacity for scene completion is a survival adaptation honed over millions of years. In the chaotic, predator-filled landscapes of early humanity, the ability to quickly infer the presence of hidden dangers or opportunities was a matter of life and death. A predator half concealed behind brush, a fruit barely glimpsed among leaves, a companion seen only through shifting shadows. These incomplete signals needed to be completed instantly to guide action. Evolution favored minds that could fill in gaps automatically, trading raw accuracy for speed and utility. Modern neuroscience
has mapped some of the systems responsible for this remarkable ability. Visual information entering the eyes is processed first in the primary visual cortex, V1, where basic features like edges, colors, and motion are extracted. But perception does not stop there. Higher-level regions, such as V2, V4, and the inferotemporal cortex, integrate these features into complex representations, objects, faces, scenes. Crucially, these areas do not passively wait for complete data. They actively predict, extrapolate, and infer, shaping perception based on expectations, prior knowledge, and statistical regularities learned over a lifetime. When you see a partially obscured object, your brain does not simply note the visible parts. It automatically fills in the missing portions based on stored models of how such objects usually appear. If you see a cat partially hidden behind a couch, you don't perceive a disjointed collection of fur and whiskers. You perceive a complete cat, a three-dimensional, continuous being, even though most of its body is invisible. Your brain's model of cat plugs the gaps, offering a seamless experience where none could be derived purely from the raw sensory input. Experimental psychology has explored scene completion through ingenious illusions. One classic example is the Canisa triangle, where three Pac-Man-like shapes positioned in a circle suggest the presence of a bright white triangle that isn't actually drawn. Viewers perceive the illusory triangle effortlessly, its edges and surfaces as vivid as if they were physically present. Here, the brain's scene completion mechanisms are laid bare. It constructs shapes, surfaces, and borders based on hints, extrapolating far beyond the literal information provided. In more dynamic settings, similar effects occur constantly. Drivers navigating through fog, soldiers scanning chaotic battlefields, doctors interpreting hazy X-rays, all rely on the mind's ability to complete scenes swiftly and unconsciously. These completions are often accurate, but they are vulnerable to error. Optical illusions, visual camouflages, and even criminal eyewitness misidentifications exploit the brain's tendency to fill in missing pieces according to expectation rather than fact. The implications of scene completion reach deep into philosophical and existential questions. If what we see is partly constructed from our expectations, experiences, and memories, then perception is not a window to an objective world, but a dance between reality and imagination. Two people witnessing the same event may see subtly, or radically, different versions of it, shaped by their unique mental models. This idea finds vivid expression in the phenomenon of inattentional blindness, where individuals fail to notice unexpected objects or events in their field of view because their mental model of the scene does not predict them. The famous invisible gorilla experiment, where participants focused on counting basketball passes failed to see a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene, demonstrates how strongly the mind filters reality based on expectation. Scene completion and inattentional blindness are two sides of the same coin, the brain constructing reality, completing what it expects, and ignoring what it does not. Even memory, it turns out, is not immune to scene completion illusions. Studies show that when people recall past events, their memories often complete scenes in ways that feel natural but are factually inaccurate. A participant might remember seeing books on a professor's desk during a staged theft scenario, even though no books were present, because books are consistent with the mental model of a professor's office. The brain's tendency to fill in expected details extends beyond perception into recollection, blurring the line between seeing and remembering. Interestingly, neuroimaging studies reveal that the brain areas activated during scene completion are not limited to the visual cortex. Memory centers such as the hippocampus also become involved, suggesting that filling in gaps relies heavily on stored knowledge and personal history. What we see is not just about what strikes our retinas, but about what we know, what we expect, what we have lived. Pathologies of scene completion can offer unsettling insights. In certain types of neurological damage, such as strokes affecting the right parietal lobe, patients may exhibit neglect syndromes, ignoring parts of their visual field without realizing it. When asked to describe a familiar scene, they omit half of it, yet insist their description is complete. Their brains have seamlessly filled in the missing parts, creating a coherent, but fundamentally incomplete, perception. Such cases reveal the invisible scaffolding that normally supports perception, only becoming visible when it collapses. Art and literature, too, have long played with the mechanisms of scene completion. Impressionist painters like Monet and Renoir used loose, suggestive brushstrokes that required the viewer's mind to complete the image. Writers craft stories with gaps and ambiguities, trusting readers to fill in motivations, emotions, and unseen events. In both cases, the artistry lies not just in what is presented, but in what is left for the mind to imagine. In a very real sense, the world we experience is a collaboration between external reality and internal invention. The brain's scene completion systems allow us to navigate a noisy, ambiguous environment with astonishing efficiency, but they also ensure that pure objectivity is forever beyond our reach. We live in a world shaped not only by photons and sound waves, but by memory, expectation, desire, and fear. Some cognitive scientists argue that scene completion is not merely a feature of vision, but a fundamental property of consciousness itself. At every level, sensory, emotional, conceptual, the mind completes incomplete information to create a coherent self, a coherent world, a coherent life story. Without this constant unconscious construction, consciousness itself might fragment into meaningless flashes of sensation. Understanding the scene completion illusion invites a certain humility. It reminds us that certainty is always partial, that what we know and see is never purely given, but always shaped by unseen forces within the mind. It invites empathy too. If others see the world differently, it is not necessarily because they are foolish or blind, but because their minds complete the scene differently, based on their own experiences. And there is a beauty in this, a strange, delicate beauty, in the realization that perception is not a static mirror, but a living, breathing dance of mind and world. Every moment, every glance, every breath, is a tapestry woven from light and memory, sensation and imagination. The next time you catch yourself effortlessly recognizing a friend across a crowded room, piecing together the meaning of a half-heard conversation, or interpreting the hidden sadness behind a stranger's smile, pause for a moment. Marvel at the hidden artistry of your own mind, tirelessly completing the scene, tirelessly building a world from fragments and hints, shadows and glimmers. You are not merely seeing the world, you are, in every moment, creating it.
There is a peculiar kind of frustration that nearly everyone has experienced. A moment when you know the word you want to say. You can feel it forming somewhere in the recesses of your mind. You might even know how many syllables it has, what letter it starts with, or what it sounds like. And yet, despite your desperate grasping, the word refuses to come forth. It hovers maddeningly at the edges of consciousness, tantalizingly close, but agonizingly out of reach. This is the tip of the tongue phenomenon, a strange cognitive hiccup that reveals much about how memory, language, and consciousness intertwine in the hidden machinery of the mind. The experience is so universal that almost every culture has a name for it. In English, it is the tip of the tongue. In Korean, it is chuk chuk hada, meaning to be almost there, but not quite. In Spanish, tenerlo en la punta de la lengua, to have it on the tip of the tongue. Across languages, across continents, humans recognize this odd mental limbo, this surreal feeling of knowing and not knowing simultaneously. For centuries, philosophers and psychologists have pondered the nature of this phenomenon.
How can a word feel known yet inaccessible? What does it mean for knowledge to exist just beyond the threshold of retrieval? How does the mind organize and access the vast web of words, concepts, and memories it holds? Modern cognitive science offers fascinating insights. The prevailing theory is that the tip of the tongue state occurs when there is a partial retrieval failure within the brain's lexical system. In simpler terms, the brain successfully accesses the meaning of a word, but struggles to retrieve its exact form, its phonological representation. You know what the word means, you may even recognize it if you hear it, but you cannot produce it spontaneously. Words in the brain are not stored as isolated units, but as complex networks of meaning, sound, and grammatical information. Retrieving a word involves activating this network, linking the semantic meaning-related pathways with the phonological sound-related pathways. Normally, this process is seamless, almost instant, but sometimes the activation of the network is incomplete. The semantic aspects fire correctly. You know the concept, the idea, but the phonological node remains dormant or blocked. It is as if the bridge between knowing and speaking has collapsed just a few feet short of the destination. Neuroimaging studies reveal that during a tip of the tongue state, areas such as the anterior cingulate cortex and parts of the frontal lobe show heightened activity. These regions are associated with error detection and conflict monitoring, suggesting that the brain recognizes the gap, the failure to retrieve, and devotes extra resources to resolving it. The emotional tension and frustration we feel are not incidental. They are neurobiological signals that something is wrong, that a normally fluid process has jammed. Interestingly, the more you struggle to recall the missing word, the harder it can become. This paradoxical effect, known as retrieval blocking, happens because the repeated activation of incorrect or related words can create interference, making it even more difficult to access the correct word. It's like trying to find a specific page in a book while someone keeps flipping through the wrong chapters. The mind, flooded with near misses, becomes its own obstacle. Yet, often the missing word suddenly pops into awareness, minutes, hours, or even days later, often when we are no longer actively trying to retrieve it. This phenomenon, called spontaneous resolution, highlights another key aspect of memory. Much of it operates unconsciously, beneath the surface of deliberate thought. When we stop consciously searching, the brain continues to sift through its archives, and sometimes, unexpectedly, delivers the missing piece. The tip of the tongue experience is more common with proper nouns, names of people, places, or specific titles, than with common nouns or verbs. This may be because proper nouns are more weakly connected to other concepts in the brain's semantic network, while a word like apple is connected to a rich web of related concepts: fruit, red, sweet, tree, pie. A specific name like Daedalus may have fewer associative pathways, making retrieval more fragile. Age also plays a role. Older adults report experiencing the tip of the tongue phenomenon more frequently than younger people. This is not necessarily a sign of cognitive decline, but may reflect subtle changes in the brain's retrieval mechanisms over time. As the brain ages, the networks involved in accessing words become less efficient, leading to more frequent retrieval failures, even while overall vocabulary and knowledge remain robust. Emotion can intensify the experience. Words associated with strong emotions, love, anger, fear, are often retrieved more easily, because emotional arousal enhances memory encoding and retrieval. But when a highly charged word slips into a tip of the tongue state, the frustration can be even sharper, the urgency to retrieve it even greater, creating a vicious cycle of blocking and anxiety.
Bilingual individuals experience the phenomenon as well, sometimes with an added twist. The desired word may be accessible in one language, but not in the other. Language switching can both help and hinder retrieval, depending on the context and the individual's level of fluency. Studies show that bilingual brains manage separate but overlapping lexical systems, and interference between them can sometimes trigger or exacerbate tip-of-the-tongue states. Curiously, tip-of-the-tongue moments are not purely negative. They reflect the brain's deep and active engagement with language, memory, and self-monitoring. They demonstrate that knowledge is not simply stored passively, but is actively navigated and constructed in real time. Every failed retrieval is also a testament to the mind's incredible capacity to organize and access vast reservoirs of information, even if it occasionally falters. Artists and writers have long been fascinated by the experience. The sense of groping toward an elusive word, a perfect expression just beyond reach, mirrors the broader creative struggle, the attempt to capture fleeting insights and crystallize them into form. Some have even suggested that the tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon, frustrating though it is, hints at the richness of unconscious thought, the deep well of ideas and connections simmering beneath awareness. Philosophically, the phenomenon raises profound questions about the nature of knowledge and self. If we can know something without being able to access it, what does it mean to know at all? Where exactly does a memory or a word reside when it is absent from conscious thought, but present enough to create the feeling of near retrieval? The tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon reveals that the boundary between knowing and not knowing is porous, shifting, and mysterious. Some researchers have explored ways to overcome tip-of-the-tongue states, providing cues, such as the first letter of the word, its meaning, or its rhythm, can often help jolt the memory into completing the retrieval. Reframing the search mentally, focusing not on the word itself but on its associations, can sometimes break the blockage. And perhaps most importantly, stepping away, relaxing, and allowing unconscious processes to continue the search can often bring the word bubbling up into awareness. In clinical settings, understanding the tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon can aid in distinguishing normal aging from pathological memory loss. While occasional word-finding difficulties are common and benign, significant increases in frequency or severity may signal early cognitive decline. Careful assessment of language and retrieval patterns provides valuable diagnostic information. At its core, the tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon is a mirror of the mind's complexity. It reminds us that memory is not a simple warehouse but a living, breathing network of meanings, sounds, emotions, and contexts, woven together in endlessly dynamic ways. It shows us that consciousness is not an all-seeing eye but a fluctuating field of access and inaccessibility, presence and absence, certainty and doubt. The next time you find yourself trapped in that peculiar limbo, knowing that you know, yet unable to say, take a moment to marvel at the strangeness and beauty of it. You are witnessing the intricate ballet of neurons, the delicate architecture of memory and language, the profound mystery of the thinking, speaking mind. You are not broken or failing. You are human, gloriously, imperfectly human, reaching across the vast spaces of thought, chasing after the shimmering threads of meaning, forging connections in the endless dance of memory, language, and self. And when at last the missing word returns, suddenly, triumphantly, savor it. Feel the quiet click of recognition, the flood of satisfaction, for in that moment you touch the hidden workings of your mind, the endless intricate labyrinth, from which all thought, all speech, all stories arise.
There are moments, sudden bewildering moments, when language, usually so fluid and effortless, betrays us. You reach for a simple word, a word you know as intimately as your own breath, but instead
something else emerges. You call the cat telephone, ask someone to close the banana instead of the window, or stumble awkwardly over phrases that moments before lived easily on your tongue. You hear yourself, almost from a distance, puzzled and embarrassed by the bizarre mismatch between thought and speech. This is the strange phenomenon of saying the wrong word, a common yet often unsettling consequence of stress, fatigue, and the delicate machinery of human language teetering under pressure. Language is one of the most complex and miraculous abilities the brain commands. Every sentence we speak is the product of countless rapid-fire processes, conceptualizing meaning, selecting words, organizing them into grammatical structures, activating the correct phonological patterns, and finally coordinating the physical movements required for articulation. All of this happens in fractions of a second, so quickly and automatically that we rarely notice the intricate ballet of cognition that allows us to express thought. Yet this system, for all its sophistication, is vulnerable. Stress, exhaustion, anxiety, distraction, any of these can introduce tiny cracks into the smooth surface of linguistic production. When the mind is strained, the delicate processes of word retrieval and speech planning can falter, and when they do, strange substitutions can slip through, words that sound similar, words that are conceptually related, words pulled from nearby neural networks without conscious permission. Cognitive scientists call these mistakes speech errors, and they have been studied for decades as a window into the architecture of the mind. The specific kind where the wrong word is swapped in is known as a lexical substitution error. Researchers have found that such errors are not random, but follow recognizable patterns. Often the mistaken word is semantically related to the intended word, saying knife instead of fork, or phonologically similar, saying cat instead of cap. Sometimes the two words share both meaning and sound, making the substitution even more likely. The reasons these errors occur are deeply rooted in how the brain organizes language. Words are not stored in isolation, but in networks, vast constellations of associations based on meaning, sound, grammar, and experience. When we prepare to speak, we activate a target word, but neighboring words in the network can also become partially activated. Under normal circumstances, the correct word wins out. But when cognitive resources are strained, when we are tired, stressed, distracted, or emotionally overwhelmed, the suppression of competing words weakens, and a neighbor may slip into the spotlight. Stress, in particular, is a powerful disruptor. When the body enters a state of stress, the sympathetic nervous system floods the bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol, preparing the body for fight or flight. These physiological changes sharpen certain forms of attention and reaction time, but can impair higher cognitive functions, including the delicate, timing-sensitive operations of language production. The brain under stress prioritizes survival, not eloquence. Words, once easily plucked from mental shelves, now jostle chaotically, and errors emerge. Fatigue exerts a similar effect, but through a different mechanism. When the brain is tired, neuronal signaling becomes less efficient. Communication between brain regions slows down, inhibitory control weakens, speech errors become more frequent, and monitoring for mistakes becomes harder. It's not that the brain forgets language, it's that the control mechanisms that usually keep speech orderly start to falter, allowing odd or incorrect words to bubble to the surface. Interestingly, saying the wrong word can reveal much about how our minds are organized. In moments of error, hidden structures are exposed: the associations we make, the categories we store together, the phonological patterns we prioritize. A slip of the tongue is not a random glitch, but a map of cognitive relationships, a glimpse into the tangled architecture of meaning and sound within us. Psycholinguists like Victoria Fromkin
and Gary Dell have catalogued thousands of such errors, building models of speech production that account for their patterns. One influential theory is the spreading activation model, which proposes that activating one word also partially activates related words. Normally, the system resolves this competition efficiently, but under strain, competing words may achieve sufficient activation to be mistakenly selected, especially if the target word's activation is weakened by fatigue or distraction. Speech errors are often amusing, the source of endless bloopers, jokes, and humorous stories. Yet they can also be distressing, especially when they occur in high-stakes situations, a public speech, a job interview, an emotional conversation. In these moments, saying the wrong word can feel like a betrayal, not just of language, but of self, exposing vulnerability at precisely the moment one most wishes to appear competent and in control. In clinical contexts, frequent or severe speech errors can be a sign of neurological problems. Aphasia, a disorder often caused by stroke or brain injury, involves disruptions in language production and comprehension. Patients with certain types of aphasia may experience extreme forms of lexical substitution, calling a pen a book or a chair a table. Studying these conditions has provided invaluable insights into the neural underpinnings of language, revealing specialized regions such as Broca's area and Wernicke's area that are critical for different aspects of speech. However, for the vast majority of people, occasional word substitutions are a normal part of cognitive life, especially under conditions of stress or fatigue. They are reminders that the human mind, for all its brilliance, is not infallible. Language, like all complex systems, is vulnerable to error, and it is precisely this vulnerability that makes it so fascinating, so human. In moments when we say the wrong word, we experience a kind of cognitive dissonance. Our intention and our expression diverge. We know what we meant, but what we said feels foreign, jarring. This momentary rupture highlights the normally invisible processes by which thought is transformed into speech. It reminds us that speaking is not merely thinking out loud, but a complex, finely balanced performance, constantly vulnerable to disruption. Culturally, speech errors have long been recognized and even celebrated. In literature, characters' slips of the tongue can reveal hidden fears, desires, or conflicts, a tradition that Freud famously explored in his theory of the Freudian slip, suggesting that errors sometimes expose repressed thoughts. While most modern researchers see speech errors as arising from normal cognitive processes rather than unconscious wishes, the idea that mistakes can be meaningful retains its allure. Moreover, speech errors are often a source of connection. When someone stumbles over their words, especially in a moment of stress, it humanizes them. It shows vulnerability, fallibility, authenticity. We laugh not just at others' slips but with them, recognizing a shared fragility in the face of language's complexities. In this way, mistakes can bridge gaps between people, creating moments of empathy and shared humanity. Technological advances, too, highlight the challenge of speech production. Even sophisticated AI language models, trained on vast corpora of text, sometimes generate incorrect word choices or awkward phrasing. This struggle reflects the inherent difficulty of navigating the infinite branching pathways of meaning and sound, a task that human brains perform with extraordinary skill most of the time, but not flawlessly. In moments when you say the wrong word, when stress tightens its grip, when fatigue clouds your mind, when your thoughts race ahead of your tongue, pause, smile. You are witnessing a small poignant truth, that speech is not mechanical, but alive, dynamic, vulnerable, that every word we speak is a leap of faith, a fragile thread spun between thought and world. You are not failing, you are simply human, marvelously, messily human, dancing across the tightrope of language, carrying the infinite cargo of meaning, hope, fear, and dreams in every trembling syllable. And in that dance, in those slips and stumbles, There is beauty, there is courage, and there is the profound wonder of being a mind alive, striving always to be understood.
There is a strange, almost comical kind of betrayal that happens sometimes. A moment when you are searching frantically for something important, your glasses, your keys, your phone. You turn the room upside down, frustration mounting, only to discover, with a mixture of embarrassment and disbelief, that the missing object was right there, in full view, all along, sitting innocently on the table, lying on the couch, perched atop your own head. How could it have been invisible to you when it was so obviously present? This peculiar lapse, this misplacing of objects in plain sight, is far more than a simple oversight. It is a profound glimpse into the hidden workings of attention, perception, and memory, and a reminder that seeing is not the same as noticing, that reality is not always faithfully registered by the mind. At first, such moments seem trivial, an everyday annoyance to be laughed off, but the deeper you look, the more they reveal unsettling truths about the nature of consciousness itself. How much of the world around us do we actually perceive? How much is filtered out, glossed over, hidden in plain sight by a brain that, far from recording everything, edits ruthlessly to create a coherent, manageable experience? The human brain is not a passive sponge, soaking up every detail of the environment. It is a masterful sculptor, selecting, emphasizing, and discarding information based on attention, expectation, and relevance. At any given moment, your senses bombard your brain with far more information than it can consciously process. To avoid being overwhelmed, your mind filters, focusing on what it deems important and relegating the rest to the background. This process, while efficient, creates the conditions for inattentional blindness, a well-documented phenomenon where obvious stimuli are ignored because they fall outside the focus of attention. The famous invisible gorilla experiment is a classic illustration. Participants tasked with counting basketball passes often fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. Their eyes see everything, but their brains do not register it because attention is elsewhere. The same mechanism underlies the experience of misplacing objects in plain sight. When you are searching for your keys, your mind may build an internal model of where they should be, on the kitchen counter, in your bag by the door. You scan based on that model, filtering the visual field for expected shapes, locations, and contexts. If the keys are somewhere unexpected, on a bookshelf, under a newspaper, sitting atop a colorful tablecloth, your brain may literally not register them, even though your eyes pass over them. Expectations create a kind of cognitive blindfold. What does not fit is often edited out of awareness. Vision, in this sense, is not purely about optics, but about interpretation. You see not only with your eyes but with your mind, and your mind is a surprisingly unreliable narrator. Fatigue, stress, and distraction exacerbate this effect. A tired or anxious brain has reduced cognitive resources for monitoring the environment and maintaining attentional flexibility. When cognitive load is high, mental models become more rigid, less adaptive. You search the same spots repeatedly, mentally locked into expectations, unable to shift perspective or notice what lies outside the anticipated framework. Moreover, memory plays a critical role. Locating an object is not just about perception, but about recalling recent actions, where you last placed the item, how you moved through the space. When memory fails or is incomplete, the search becomes unguided, more reliant on guesswork than recollection. You may literally look at the missing item without recognizing it, because you are not expecting it there, because the contextual link, the story that connects the object to its location, is broken. Research into change blindness
The failure to notice visual changes in a scene further illuminates the fragility of perception. In clever experiments, subjects often fail to notice large alterations in an image when their attention is distracted momentarily, even when critical features are added, removed, or transformed. The brain does not store a perfect image of the world, but a compressed conceptual version, enough to guide action, but full of gaps and assumptions. In everyday life, this means that reality, as we experience it, is not a faithful mirror of the external world, but a mental construction optimized for survival, not for accuracy. What is obvious after the fact, the keys on the table, the phone on the counter, was genuinely invisible at the time, because it fell through the cracks of attention and expectation. This cognitive blind spot can have profound consequences beyond trivial everyday annoyances. In fields like aviation, medicine, and military operations, missing something in plain sight can lead to catastrophic errors. Pilots are trained to use systematic scanning techniques to avoid inattentional blindness. Surgeons and nurses rely on checklists and standardized protocols to ensure that critical details are not overlooked amid the chaos of a busy operating room. The stakes in such contexts are a stark reminder that the mind's blind spots are not merely academic curiosities, but serious vulnerabilities. Yet, despite its potential for error, the brain's editing of reality is also a source of extraordinary efficiency. If we consciously processed every detail of every moment, we would be paralyzed by information overload. By focusing selectively, by completing scenes and ignoring irrelevant data, the mind creates a navigable, meaningful world. Misplacing objects is a side effect of a system optimized for action, not perfection. Psychologically, moments of losing something right in front of you can trigger feelings of incompetence, frustration, even existential doubt. If you cannot trust your own perceptions, what can you trust? But such moments can also be opportunities for self-compassion, for humility, for appreciating the mysterious and dynamic nature of consciousness. Culturally, the phenomenon has inspired humor and storytelling across ages. Tales of absent-minded professors, forgetful artists, and bumbling characters who lose things in absurd places mirror our collective experience of mental lapses. They remind us that forgetfulness and perceptual errors are not signs of failure, but shared features of being human. Strategies for overcoming this blind spot include slowing down, consciously expanding the search to unexpected locations, describing aloud the item being sought, and using tactile rather than purely visual cues. Training attention, reducing stress, and cultivating mindfulness can also enhance perceptual flexibility, making it easier to notice what is present rather than what is expected. At a deeper level, misplacing objects in plain sight touches upon profound philosophical questions about reality and illusion. If we can miss what is literally before our eyes, how can we trust the broader narratives we build about our lives, our relationships, our world? If seeing is not always believing, then what anchors us to reality? The answer, perhaps, lies in embracing uncertainty, recognizing that perception is a dance between self and world, between expectation and discovery. Each act of seeing is a negotiation, a gamble, a creation. We are not passive witnesses but active participants in the making of reality. The next time you find yourself searching, cursing, disbelieving that something so obvious could have been invisible, pause, smile. You are witnessing the marvel and mystery of the human mind, a system powerful enough to create worlds, yet humble enough to sometimes lose its keys on the kitchen table. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are simply human, gloriously, imperfectly human, living in a world more fluid, more dynamic, more astonishing than the eye alone can see. And in that fleeting moment of lost and found, you glimpse a secret truth, that what matters most is not always what is visible, but what is seen, and that seeing is always an act of wonder.
In the age of smartphones,
and instant messaging, communication has evolved at dizzying speed. We text friends, colleagues, and family members hundreds of times a day, tapping out fragments of thought that bridge distance and time. Yet, amid the fluidity and immediacy of digital conversations, a peculiar and often comical phenomenon occurs: the automatic substitution of words during texting. Words we never intended to write suddenly materialize on the screen, changing the meaning of our messages, creating misunderstandings, and sometimes sparking unexpected laughter or confusion. This everyday glitch, both trivial and profound, reveals intricate truths about how our minds, our machines, and our language intertwine. At first, it seems obvious to blame the machines. Autocorrect, the helpful yet mischievous software embedded in our phones, often leaps ahead of us, replacing what it thinks we meant to type with what it decides is correct. Stories abound of texts transformed from innocent notes into accidental declarations of nonsense or unintended hilarity. Parents texting their children to bring the duck instead of the deck, friends inviting each other to meet for lunch, or co-workers scheduling a brainstorming session instead of a session. Autocorrect fails have become a genre of humor unto themselves, immortalized in screenshots and shared across social media. But if we peer beneath the surface, the phenomenon is deeper and more fascinating than mere software glitches. Word substitutions during texting are not only technological errors, they are cognitive artifacts shaped by the fundamental ways our brains generate and process language. Even without autocorrect, humans are prone to similar substitutions in writing and speech, especially under conditions of speed, distraction, or fatigue. Texting simply magnifies and exposes these tendencies, giving them a new and visible form. The act of composing a text message involves several overlapping cognitive processes. First, we formulate an intention, a thought we wish to express. Then we translate that thought into words, choosing among the vast repository of vocabulary stored in our minds. Next, we retrieve the specific phonological and orthographic representations of those words, how they sound, and how they are spelled. Finally, we execute the physical action of typing them, translating mental symbols into finger movements on a touch screen. Each stage of this process is vulnerable to error, particularly under the conditions that characterize modern texting: speed, divided attention, multitasking, and reliance on predictive algorithms. When time is short and attention is scattered, the brain may default to words that are more readily accessible, words that are more common, more recently used, or more strongly associated semantically or phonologically with the intended word. Cognitive scientists refer to this as semantic interference and phonological priming. If you have recently thought about lunch, you are more likely to type meat instead of meat. If you are thinking about politics, secession might leap out instead of session. The brain's language production system operates on activation levels. Words related in meaning or sound are partially activated, even when they are not the intended target. Under pressure, the wrong word can win the race to the keyboard. Autocorrect and predictive text systems amplify these tendencies by making their own guesses based on probabilities derived from massive language datasets. These systems are trained to anticipate common word sequences and correct perceived errors, but they can only operate based on general patterns, not the specific intentions of an individual user in a particular moment. As a result, autocorrect often substitutes words that are statistically likely but contextually absurd, a technological echo of the brain's own fallibility. Ironically, the better predictive text systems become at guessing common phrases, the more they can clash with the uniqueness of personal expression. Language is not just about patterns, it is about creativity, nuance,
subtext, and emotion. Autocorrect, in its quest for statistical efficiency, sometimes bulldozes over the delicate individuality of communication, replacing living thought with algorithmic approximation. There is also a phenomenon known as input modality interference that affects texting specifically. Typing on a touch screen, with its small keys and high error rates, differs cognitively from writing by hand or typing on a full keyboard. The brain adapts to the constraints of the medium, often prioritizing speed and approximation over precision. Small typing errors, hitting N instead of me, for example, can lead autocorrect to infer an entirely different word than intended. The tactile feedback of physical keyboards, missing on touch screens, once helped to reduce such errors. Stress and fatigue, as always, exacerbate the problem. A tired brain has reduced inhibitory control, meaning that irrelevant or competing words are more likely to intrude. Multitasking, so common when texting, walking, watching television, half listening to a conversation, further fragments attention, increasing the likelihood of cognitive slips and technological misinterpretations. Beyond individual factors, cultural patterns influence word substitution in texting. In highly informal or slang-heavy texting cultures, predictive text systems trained on more formal datasets often misinterpret the user's intended meaning. As language evolves rapidly in digital spaces, autocorrect systems struggle to keep up, leading to substitutions that feel outdated, awkward, or humorously out of place. The phenomenon also raises fascinating questions about the evolving relationship between humans and technology. In relying on predictive algorithms to assist our communication, we both extend and surrender aspects of our linguistic agency. We type faster and more easily, but we also invite the machine to become a co-author of our messages, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly. When the wrong word appears, it is no longer clear where the responsibility lies, with the user, with the software, or with the complex dance between mind and machine. From a psychological perspective, the emotional impact of word substitutions can be surprisingly intense. A mistaken word can transform the tone of a message, introducing unintended humor, awkwardness, or even offense. A simple autocorrect error can escalate into a misunderstanding, a hurt feeling, or a derailed conversation. The fragility of text-based communication, stripped of vocal tone, facial expression, and immediate feedback, makes it particularly vulnerable to the ripple effects of minor linguistic errors. Yet, there is also a charm and a humanity in these mistakes. They remind us that language is a living, evolving, imperfect tool. They expose the hidden processes behind the polished surface of communication, revealing the messy, creative, unpredictable nature of thought itself. They create moments of shared laughter, moments of forgiveness, moments of recognition that we are all navigating the complexity of expression together. In a broader sense, word substitutions in texting symbolize the broader human condition in the digital age. Our striving for connection filtered through imperfect channels, our reliance on technology tempered by its limitations, our endless dance between control and surrender. They capture the tension between speed and meaning, between efficiency and authenticity, between the mechanical and the deeply human. Technologists continue to refine predictive text algorithms, incorporating more personalized learning, context sensitivity, and even emotional nuance into autocorrect systems. Future iterations may reduce the frequency of inappropriate substitutions, or at least make them more aligned with individual users' styles. Voice recognition systems and AI writing assistants are expanding the possibilities for more natural, fluid digital communication, but they too bring new challenges and new forms of error. Ultimately, word substitutions during texting are unlikely ever to disappear entirely. They are artifacts not only of technological imperfections, but of cognitive realities. The richness, messiness, and dynamism of human language production. Every misplaced word is a tiny monument to the complexity of thought, the unpredictability of attention, the flexibility of the mind. The next time you send a text that comes out mangled, surreal, or accidentally hilarious, take a moment to appreciate the hidden beauty of it. You are not just making a mistake, you are participating in a grand experiment, the evolving, imperfect, glorious attempt to share mind with mind, across time, space, and machine. You are not alone, you are not failing, you are simply human, gloriously, inventively human, tapping out meaning, one imperfect, living word at a time. And in every slip, every substitution, every unexpected twist of language, you reaffirm the endless wonder of being a creature who dreams in words.
It happens almost without warning, a small tremor of uncertainty that interrupts the flow of your day. You're halfway to work, or already sitting in a meeting, or lying in bed, when the thought strikes you like a sudden gust. Wait, did I lock the door? You replay the morning in your mind, searching for a clear memory of the act, the key turning, the satisfying click of the lock, but the scene is hazy, slippery, incomplete. Anxiety wells up. Did you lock it? Did you forget? Is your home, your safe place, now vulnerable because of a tiny lapse in an otherwise automatic routine? This familiar glitch, the creeping doubt about actions we're almost certain we performed, is more than just an annoyance. It reveals deep truths about how the mind handles routine behavior, memory, attention, and the fragile intersection between habit and conscious awareness. It touches on the nature of certainty itself, on the strange way that even the most solid moments of our lives can dissolve into mist when we look back at them too closely. To understand this peculiar experience, we must first explore how automatic actions work. Many of our daily activities, locking doors, turning off stoves, setting alarms, are habits, sequences of behavior performed with minimal conscious thought. Habits are the brain's way of conserving energy and optimizing efficiency. By delegating frequently repeated tasks to automatic processes, the mind frees itself to focus on more complex, novel, or demanding challenges. When you lock the door in the morning, you may barely be aware of doing it. Your mind may already be elsewhere, planning the day ahead, reviewing tasks, worrying about time. The act of locking the door is executed flawlessly by deeply ingrained motor programs, without the need for detailed conscious supervision. You don't have to think about each step, reaching for the key, inserting it, turning it, because your body knows the script. Yet this very efficiency creates a paradox. Because the action is automatic, it often fails to leave a distinct, consciously accessible memory trace. In cognitive psychology, this is referred to as absent-mindedness, a phenomenon where behavior is successfully performed but poorly encoded into episodic memory, the type of memory that records specific events in a personal timeline. Without a clear, vivid memory of the action, doubt can creep in later, especially when prompted by anxiety or the recognition of how important the action was. This doubt is not proof of failure. In fact, most of the time, the door was locked, the stove was turned off, the keys were pocketed, the act was completed successfully, but because it was performed automatically, the mind treats it almost like background noise, filing it away without attaching emotional salience or detailed recall. When you later ask yourself whether you performed the action, you find yourself probing an empty space, no vivid memory to reassure you, only a blankness where certainty should be. Stress and multitasking heighten this vulnerability. When the mind is overloaded, juggling multiple thoughts, worries, distractions,
the encoding of routine actions becomes even weaker. Your attention was divided when you locked the door, pulled by a buzzing phone, or an urgent mental list, and so the memory trace is even fainter, more elusive. The brain, sensing the importance of the forgotten act, sounds an alarm, but it cannot supply proof, only the discomforting possibility of failure. This wait, did I? Phenomenon is closely related to the psychological concept of metacognition, our ability to monitor and evaluate our own cognitive processes. Healthy metacognition allows us to reflect on what we know, what we don't know, and what we are uncertain about. In the case of habitual actions, metacognitive monitoring sometimes triggers false uncertainty, alerting us to a gap in memory that may have no real significance. In extreme cases, this can spiral into pathological doubt, a hallmark of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. Individuals with OCD often experience chronic uncertainty about whether they have completed important actions, locking doors, turning off appliances, washing hands, leading to compulsive checking behaviors. In such cases, the ordinary mental glitch of absent-mindedness metastasizes into a disabling cycle of anxiety and reassurance seeking. But for most people, occasional doubts are a normal byproduct of the brain's balancing act between automation and awareness. Interestingly, laboratory studies have shown that performing an action with heightened attention and deliberate mental tagging can reduce later doubt. If you consciously think, "I am now locking the door," and visualize the action, you are more likely to form a robust episodic memory of it. This technique, known as prospective memory encoding, transforms an automatic behavior into a conscious event, making it easier to recall later. However, few of us have the bandwidth to live every moment with full, reflective attention. Life demands efficiency, and so most of our routines unfold semi-consciously, reliable, yet vulnerable to the occasional flicker of doubt. And perhaps this is not a flaw, but a feature, a compromise between the need for speed and the need for certainty. There is a peculiar emotional quality to the "did I lock the door" glitch, a sudden sense of disconnection from the flow of time. For a moment, the continuity of experience fractures. You are cast adrift from the familiar narrative of your day, suspended between past and present, between certainty and fear. It is a miniature existential crisis, a reminder that memory, so foundational to identity and agency, is not a fixed archive, but a fluid, fallible process. Culturally, the experience is widely recognized and humorously portrayed. Cartoons, sitcoms, and stand-up comedians mine rich veins of comedy from the spectacle of adults panicking over keys, doors, ovens, wallets, all the tiny rituals that protect daily life, but sometimes falter under the weight of forgetfulness. We laugh because we recognize ourselves, because we know how fragile our command over the everyday truly is. Technological aids have emerged to address this fragility. Smart locks that send notifications when doors are secured, apps that log the status of appliances, wearable devices that vibrate to remind you of actions, all attempt to outsource memory to external systems. Yet even these solutions are imperfect, prone to technical failures and new forms of anxiety. Did the notification actually send? Did the battery die? The deeper truth remains: no system can fully eliminate the human experience of doubt, because doubt arises not from the external world, but from the mind's own architecture. Philosophers have long pondered the nature of certainty and doubt. Descartes, in his quest for indubitable knowledge, recognized that the senses and memory could not be wholly trusted. In the end, he found certainty only in the act of doubting itself. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. In a way, the "did I lock the door" glitch is a tiny echo of that philosophical realization. In doubting, we reaffirm our existence, our engagement with the fragile, dynamic fabric of lived experience. There is strangely a kind of beauty in this vulnerability. To doubt is to care, to recognize the importance of the world we inhabit and the roles we play within it. Locking the door is not just a mechanical act, but a symbolic one, a gesture of protection, of stewardship, of responsibility. To worry that you have failed in that act is to affirm your connection to place, to safety, to others. The next time you feel that jolt of uncertainty, that eerie, disorienting, wait, did I pause, smile? You are not failing, you are not broken, you are simply human, navigating the endless dance between habit and attention, memory and doubt. You are living the delicate, beautiful paradox of a mind that must balance speed with reflection, automation with awareness, trust with vigilance. You locked the door, or maybe you didn't. Either way, you are here, awake, wondering, caring, and that perhaps is what matters most.
You sit with a book open before you, eyes scanning line after line, words slipping by in neat procession. A paragraph passes, then a page, maybe two, and then it strikes you, a sudden hollow feeling. You have no idea what you just read. The words were seen, yes, but not absorbed. Their shapes flickered across your mind, like shadows, leaving no lasting imprint. You turn back, retrace your steps, reread sentences that now seem new, but the disconnection persists, a silent drift of attention away from meaning. This is the strange and frustrating experience of reading without processing, a phenomenon more common than most people dare admit, and one that touches on the deepest mysteries of how attention, memory, and consciousness are woven together. At first glance, reading seems like a simple act. Eyes move across text, words are decoded, meaning is extracted. But beneath this apparent simplicity lies an astonishingly complex sequence of cognitive operations. To read effectively, the brain must coordinate vision, language comprehension, attention, memory, and executive control. It must maintain a dynamic map of context, the meaning of previous sentences, the overarching purpose of the passage, the nuances of tone and implication. All this must happen seamlessly, moment by moment, without conscious effort. Yet, the mind is a restless creature. It is not designed for endless, undivided focus. It hungers for novelty, for stimulation, for change. When the material in front of us fails to fully engage our attention, when it is too dense, too familiar, too dry, or when external distractions or internal worries pull at the edges of awareness, the fragile scaffolding of reading collapses. The eyes continue their mechanical journey across the page, but the mind drifts elsewhere, leaving comprehension behind. This phenomenon is often referred to in cognitive science as mindless reading. It is a subtype of mind wandering, a state where attention shifts away from the task at hand toward unrelated thoughts, memories, plans, or fantasies. Studies using eye tracking and self-report measures show that mindless reading is surprisingly frequent, even among skilled readers. In laboratory settings, participants often fail to notice that they have lost track of the meaning until prompted. In real-world situations, entire chapters can slip by without true engagement. Mindless reading illustrates a crucial point. Attention is not a constant beam, but a fluctuating field. It waxes and wanes, narrows and broadens, sometimes pulled tight to the task, sometimes slipping away into private worlds. Then maintaining focused attention, especially on extended, demanding material, requires active effort, a quiet mental discipline that is easily disrupted by fatigue, boredom, emotional distraction, or cognitive overload. Neuroscientifically, mind wandering is associated with increased activity in the default mode network,
DMN, a set of interconnected brain regions that become active when the mind is not focused on the outside world. The DMN is involved in self-referential thinking, daydreaming, remembering the past, and imagining the future. When attention to external stimuli weakens, the DMN rises, spinning inner narratives that pull focus away from the page. Paradoxically, the DMN is also critical for creativity, reflection, and complex problem solving. Without it, we would be trapped in the present, unable to plan, dream, or understand ourselves. Thus, the very system that enables profound cognitive achievements also makes sustained reading difficult. The brain is simply not wired to remain locked onto a single unchanging stream of information indefinitely, without periodic drift. Fatigue exacerbates mindless reading. When the brain is tired, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for maintaining goal-directed behavior, becomes less effective at suppressing irrelevant thoughts. The effort required to sustain attention increases, and lapses become more frequent. Emotional states also play a role. Anxiety, sadness, excitement, all can hijack attentional resources, making it harder to anchor to the text. In today's world of relentless digital stimulation, the challenge is even greater. The constant barrage of notifications, multitasking, and fragmented media consumption trains the brain to expect rapid novelty. Long-form reading, which requires patience, sustained attention, and the gradual accumulation of understanding, can feel strangely alien. The mind, conditioned to hop from stimulus to stimulus, finds it harder to settle, to sink deeply into the river of text. Strategies exist to counteract mindless reading. Mindfulness training, for example, strengthens the ability to recognize when attention has drifted and to gently redirect it. Breaking reading into smaller, purposeful chunks with clear goals can help. Active engagement, such as summarizing passages, asking questions, or visualizing scenes, anchors comprehension more firmly. Physical factors matter too. Posture, lighting, and environment all influence attentional stability. Some cognitive scientists suggest treating reading not as a passive intake, but as an active dialogue. Instead of viewing the text as a monologue, the reader engages it like a conversation partner, questioning, challenging, reflecting. This stance not only deepens comprehension, but reduces the likelihood of slipping into mechanical, mindless scanning. Interestingly, occasional mind-wandering during reading may not always be harmful. In some contexts, it allows the mind to make creative connections, to link new information with personal experiences, to generate insights that linear, hyper-focused reading might miss. The key is balance, allowing the mind the freedom to roam, without losing the thread of the narrative entirely. The emotional impact of reading without processing can be surprisingly intense. It can trigger feelings of incompetence, frustration, even shame. How can something as basic as reading become so slippery, so elusive? Yet these emotions are often misplaced. Mindless reading is not a failure of intelligence or character, but a natural consequence of the brain's architecture. It is a universal human experience, not a personal flaw. Culturally, the struggle with attention during reading has been recognized for centuries. Ancient texts offer advice on how to cultivate focus and guard against distraction. Monastic traditions developed elaborate practices to train the mind for contemplative reading. Writers through the ages, from Montaigne to Woolf, have acknowledged the difficulty of maintaining attention and the importance of rereading, revisiting, renewing engagement. In the educational realm, understanding the phenomenon of reading without processing is critical. Students are often judged harshly for poor comprehension or retention, but little attention is given to the cognitive challenges of sustaining attention across dense, lengthy materials. Teaching strategies that foster active engagement, metacognitive awareness, and attentional resilience can make a profound difference. Ultimately, reading without processing reminds us of a profound truth, that consciousness is not a continuous, unbroken stream, but a flickering, shifting dance. Our inner lives are composed of moments of clarity and moments of drift, of connection and dissociation. To read deeply, to comprehend truly, is an act of continual return, noticing when the mind has wandered, gently guiding it back, again and again. The next time you catch yourself scanning words without grasping their meaning, do not despair. You are not failing. You are living the fragile, heroic, everyday struggle to tether mind to world, meaning to symbol, self to story. Pause, breathe, begin again. You are not a machine. You are a mind, luminous, restless, dreaming, striving always toward understanding. And every return to the page, every act of re-engagement, every patient effort to wrestle meaning from the dance of letters, is a victory, quiet, imperfect, magnificent.
Have you ever marched into a room with a clear goal blazing in your mind, only to find yourself standing still, bewildered, the reason for your journey vanishing like smoke in the air? This strange experience has a name, the doorway effect, and it hides mysteries far deeper than a mere lapse of memory. Crossing a threshold doesn't just take you into another room. It seems to pull you into a different mental world, subtly reshaping your focus, your thoughts, and perhaps even fragments of who you are. From the earliest days of humanity, the act of crossing boundaries has carried profound meaning. When ancient humans roamed the wilderness, the transition from open plains into a cave, or from the safety of a home into the unknown outside, was life-defining. Doorways marked the passage from one reality to another, demanding vigilance, preparation, and the careful reorganization of thoughts. Our ancestors learned that danger lurked beyond every threshold, and our brains adapted accordingly. Even now, in our modern safe environments, echoes of that ancient survival instinct ripple through us. The brain treats every doorway as a signal: reset, prepare for new conditions. This ancient mechanism is still deeply embedded in us, but it no longer serves purely to shield us from predators. Instead, it sometimes misfires in amusing and puzzling ways. In 2011, psychologist Gabriel Radvansky of the University of Notre Dame conducted a study that would bring the doorway effect into the scientific spotlight. Participants were asked to move objects from one virtual room to another, all while remembering certain details about the items they carried. What he discovered was both fascinating and unsettling. Every time someone passed through a doorway, their memory performance dropped significantly. It wasn't about forgetting over time. It was the very act of crossing a threshold that scrambled their short-term recollection. It was as if the brain, sensing the boundary, closed the book on the previous scene and hurriedly opened a blank page, eager to catalog what lay ahead. Human memory is deeply intertwined with context. Our surroundings, the smell of the air, the pattern of light, the textures under our fingers, become mental anchors. When we shift environments, those anchors are left behind. The hippocampus, a small yet vital region of the brain, responsible for both spatial navigation and memory formation, plays a crucial role in this. Like an internal GPS, it updates our position in the world, but in doing so, it may also reset the short-term memories tied to our previous location. The implications of this discovery ripple far beyond casual forgetfulness. In high-risk professions, the stakes are enormous. Firefighters are trained to mentally cement their missions before entering new zones of a burning building, because they know that crossing a threshold could dislodge vital information. Pilots, too, must guard against the doorway effect as they transition between the cockpit and other sections of an aircraft. In hospitals, critical information can be lost as surgeons and nurses move between operating rooms. In all these cases, a fleeting moment of forgetfulness can cascade into life-altering consequences. Yet the doorway effect doesn't stop at memory.
Deeper investigations have hinted at an even stranger possibility, that doorways might subtly alter not just what we remember, but who we are in a given moment. In a curious experiment, researchers administered personality assessments to participants as they moved between different rooms. Shockingly, the results suggested that people's self-perceptions could shift based on the room they were in. Even when the questions remained constant, the doorway wasn't just a spatial transition, it appeared to be a portal to a different facet of their identity. Ancient cultures seemed to intuitively grasp this power. The Romans worshipped Janus, the god of doorways and transitions, often depicting him with two faces, one looking forward, one looking back, standing watch over gateways and city entrances. Travelers would pray at Janus's temples, asking for safe passage and a steady mind as they crossed thresholds. Even today, the symbolism of doorways persists in rituals, stories, and superstitions across cultures worldwide. Popular culture, too, teems with examples that hint at a hidden understanding of the power of thresholds. Alice doesn't merely walk into another room, she passes through a small mysterious door into a world governed by entirely different rules. Lucy, in the Chronicles of Narnia, steps through an ordinary wardrobe and finds herself in a snow-laden forest filled with magic and peril. Even horror films, with their obsession over what lurks beyond the door, tap into this primal anxiety. Crossing into the unknown is never just a change of scenery, it is a descent into an altered reality. What can we do to combat the doorway effect? Some tricks can help. Repeating your goal mentally as you move can anchor it more firmly in your mind. Carrying a symbolic object related to your task, such as holding a notepad if you're retrieving a note, can serve as a physical tether to your intention. Pausing before crossing a threshold, consciously reaffirming your purpose, can sometimes preserve the delicate thread of memory. And cultivating mindful movement, rather than slipping into autopilot, can significantly reduce the likelihood of mental resets. But despite these defenses, the doorway still holds its strange power. It remains a point of cognitive fracture, where memory, intention, and even identity are more vulnerable than we like to admit. It is a reminder that our minds, for all their sophistication, are deeply rooted in ancient patterns, evolved in a world of dangers and mysteries we have long since forgotten. And perhaps there are other thresholds, ones that we scarcely recognize, that alter us in subtler ways. Some legends whisper of ancient archways scattered across forgotten landscapes, gateways not merely between rooms, but between realities. Travelers, they say, who step through such doorways sometimes forget not just why they came, but who they were before crossing. Some never find their way back. The next time you cross from one room to another, and feel that eerie blankness rise within you, pause and listen closely. Maybe it's not forgetfulness at all. Maybe it's the ancient part of your mind, the guardian of thresholds, calling you to attention. Or maybe, just maybe, something waits beyond every door, eager to rewrite the story you thought was yours. And once you cross, there's no telling what or who you might leave behind.